Hello everyone, welcome to the Day 3 wrap for Pro Tour Dark Ascension Honolulu 2012. Rich Hagon, Pro Tour historian Mr. Brian David-Marshall with you. We're not live, I don't know what's going on. We gave you 19 live rounds of Magic. It's great to be with you to wrap things up. So, Brian, where do you want to start?
Well, it's been crazy. We've been doing 16 rounds of Swiss coverage of the Pro Tour, live streaming, unprecedented in Pro Tour history. We've never done this before. And it was you and I, we sat down in round one. We watched people play with Dark Ascension. It's Pro Tour Dark Ascension. It's the first opportunity for the pros to play with the new cards that shake up Standard and shake up the Innistrad Booster Draft format. And it was you and me, it was Sheldon Menery and Rashad Miller. We were in the booth watching these people play. We had Aaron Forsythe in, we had Zach Hill in, we had a parade of winners who won their rounds coming in, and it was crazy. We got to see the most harrowing round of Pro Tour Magic happen live on camera.
Yeah, the harrowing journey is always, it's kind of the penultimate round of the Swiss, and we saw just such great Magic and such tiny margins that you find people finally edging over the precipice into the top 8, and what a top 8 we got. The quarterfinals this morning saw Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa of Brazil against Jelga Wiegersma. Lucas Blahan of the Czech Republic against Mamoru Nagai, newcomer from Japan. John Finkel, one of the greats of all time, against Matthew Costa, also of the United States. And then Brian Kibler, the Dragon Master, up against Sweden's Dennis Rashid. Brian, what are your thoughts on the highlights of the quarterfinals?
Well, the highlights to me were partially getting to the quarterfinals, watching Jelga Wiegersma have to win and in to get into the top 8, and then watching Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa win his last round to get into the top 8, and as a result secure the top seed, which allowed him to play first throughout the rounds. But as amazing as a finals is between Brian Kibler and Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa, two of the titans of the game.
Yep.
The semifinal of this tournament between John Finkel and Brian Kibler is going to be remembered for as long as people are talking about Magic.
Yeah, the way the semi-finals was set up, we had De Rosa sweeping Jelga Wiegersma 3-0 with relative ease in the end. Nagai from Japan taking out Blahan 3-1. Finkel got past Matthew Costa by the same scoreline, 3-1. Looked like Costa was really close to forcing a game 5. So many people, of course, rooting for one of their all-time favorites in John Finkel. And then Brian Kibler pretty handily dispatched Denise Rashid. Now in the semis, we were down to 1 pretty quickly because Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa again expended minimum energy in defeating Nagai by 3-1. And that set the stage for this amazing 5-game set.
Yeah, it all came down to the last game. Well, actually, it came down to the next last game. John Finkel has Draw Skull Captain, Phantasmal Image copying Draw Skull Captain. He's secure behind it. He's got an army of flyers. Everything's hexproof. We know there's a Whip Flare in Brian Kibler's hand, but it's not enough.
Yep.
It's not enough. It can only do 2 damage. Everything is 3 toughness or greater on the board, and Brian Kibler is just dead next turn. He has to draw a Slagstorm, or he has to draw a second Whip Flare. He doesn't have the answer in his hand. He flips the card over, and it's the second Whip Flare. He has 2 Whip Flares in his whole deck and sideboard. He just lays them both down, wipes the board up, and then cleans up, goes to game 5. And then game 5 was outrageous. It was outrageous. Both players just playing so patiently, so deliberately.
Yeah.
And it really did not look like Brian Kibler was in the game at all up until the final turns.
Yeah, it was so slow developing for both of them. There was no Delver turn 1 flipping, no double insectile aberration. We hardly saw an insectile aberration across the 5-game set. And on the other side, Kibler with all his Solemn Simulacrums and Sphere of the Suns and Rampant Growth, his game 5 basically went land, 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 That's kind of it.
Right.
You know, there was so little happening, and that's part of what made the tension build, because you were like, it's like a phony war. Where are all the haymakers that we know are meant to be happening?
And what happened was John Finkel had seen Brian Kibler's hand with Gitaxian Probe, and he had been playing to like bait out those spells, to draw them out so he could get past them. He had to deal with a Galvanic Blast. He had to deal with a Slag Storm. He had to deal with an Inferno Titan. He'd already baited out the Inferno Titan. He knew the Galvanic Blast was there. We knew that Brian Kibler had drawn a second Galvanic Blast. And then he had drawn a third Galvanic Blast. And John, who was taking damage from a Wolf token, found himself in a position where he went to 8 from Brian Kibler's attack for 2 with a Wolf. He had just cast Lingering Souls to make 2 creatures, and he had to make a decision. Does he block or does he not block? And he chose not to block. He went to 8. Brian Kibler turns on Metalcraft by activating, by playing a Sphere of the Suns, activating an Inkmoth Nexus, throws a Galvanic Blast at John. John goes to 4.
Okay.
Another Galvanic Blast, the second one that we had seen.
I'll cast Negate.
John casts Negate, and then the third Galvanic Blast means that Brian Kibler advances to the finals to play Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa.
Honestly, it was just crazy. Crazy. And arguably the best thing about it, we said it in commentary, is that was no mistake, the no block. It was a conscious play like everything else that had preceded it.
Well, I think if you talk to John, everything with John is either it's either the wrong play or the right play.
Yeah.
But so in the sense that he lost, it may be.
But sometimes you make the right play and lose.
Absolutely.
And that's fine.
I'm saying there was definitely a conscious decision
and
to
his
not
summary,
block there.
Such is life. Meanwhile, our hearts just calmed down a little.
Yeah.
And
I sounded like Walt Clyde Fraser. It was staggering and daggering.
Yeah. And then we were left with a final between 2 housemates, 2 teammates, 2 not quite roommates, but you're all but in Brian Kibler and Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa, and 5 games of mirror action, almost card for card.
You know, it's amazing. We've seen Channel Fireball the last couple of Pro Tours, put multiple players into the top 8.
Yep.
We saw that happen in Philadelphia. We saw that happen at the World Championships. At both times, the way they sort of described it is they had like the best Swiss deck, but they did not have the best deck for the top 8. And, no pun intended, they very much remembered the Titans from Junya Ianaga in the finals of Worlds. He destroyed them with it. They felt like this Tempered Steel deck they had for Worlds was the best deck to get these people to the top 8, but it wasn't positioned for the win. And they played a ramp deck. We saw a mirror match. It was almost like 73 card, identical mirror match between these 2 players in the end. The deck delivered a little better for Brian Kibler in that last match. And Brian Kibler is your Pro Tour champion here in Honolulu, the same site.
Second time.
The same site where he returned to the Pro Tour after being retired for a number of years to make his first top 8 of the second leg of his career. Amazing.
5-time Pro Tour top 8. 2-time Pro Tour champion. Paulo, 9 top 8s in 30 appearances. And how about Raphael Levy of France? His 6 points for finishing 47th takes him to 500 lifetime pro points in a tie with Kai Butter of Germany for the largest total ever accumulated in the history of the game.
Barcelona, Kai. Barcelona.
Just saying. It has been a truly amazing weekend here. We hope you've been with us through not 1, not 2, but 3 days of live coverage. If you're watching it now as a little sort of aftermath, you can join us for the Friday night countdown, where we're going to go through lots of things that you might need to know for your trip to Friday Night Magic. Here on the Tournament Center set, it has been an epic stage, and it has been great to share our love of the game with you throughout the last 3 days. Until we meet again around the magical world of Magic the Gathering, for Brian David-Marshall, your Pro Tour historian, I'm Pro Tour statistician Richard Hagon, saying bye.